Welcome to the Journey of Self Growth podcast, episode 18. I'm Kite, the host of this event, which was created so myself and others can share perspective on the concept of it in hopes that one another's insights will be relatable, establishes awareness, and inspires listeners to adopt and maintain such behavior. The definition of self growth is the process of developing new skills, attitudes, actions, or reactions that can have a beneficial impact on your life and increases your overall well being. If you're interested in being a guest on the show, you're invited to do so by reaching out to me on Instagram at kete.music and I will respond accordingly. Um, Tonight's future guest is not only a relative, but specifically my niece. And I thank her for putting forth the initiative to um, hopefully grow in this experience, which is the purpose for the podcast ultimately, growing as individuals and hopefully through expression we can relate to one another's growth and inspire one another to continue on in our journeys as individuals. So tonight's future guest is Miss Jaszwan Veal. Hello, Jaszwan. How are you?
Hi, I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing good. What can you tell me about yourself?
Like you mentioned, my name is Jaszwan Veal. I'm 21 years young, and I am a recent graduate of Howard University. I graduated in May of 2024 with my bachelor's of science in psychology. I'm super excited. I'm very proud of myself. It was definitely a long journey, but one that was very worth it. I am a California native, but I grew up for part of my life, about 10 years, in Atlanta, Georgia. And then my family and I, we returned back to the Bay Area. And this has been my primary residence ever since. And I'm just really glad to be here.
Wow. What would be your perspective on the concept of self growth?
I would define self growth as the act of personal evolution. I believe that we as individuals are placed on this earth with a mission or a purpose to say. And oftentimes we also set our own goals that we would like to reach along the way. But I think that each of those goals is a reflection of who we are as individuals and the utmost part of our personality or what drives us. Typically, we like to invest ourselves in hobbies or interests, networking, things that reflect who we are as a person. So I think that self growth is it's gauged by any milestone or marker that brings us closer to the people that we want to be, like the person that I see myself becoming in the future. I can gauge whether or not I am growing as an individual if I'm getting closer to the woman that I hope to be in my future. So that's what I would define as self growth, or how I would interpret it.
I appreciate your insight, and for me, it is relatable. I think I will ask you relevant questions going forward based on your statement. The next question is, how are you currently growing?
I think right now, well, let me start by saying I think that we each go through seasons of growth. I think there are different periods of growth that we go through throughout our lifetime. And I don't think that you ever truly stop growing. Because, and I might be getting a little bit ahead of myself, but our experiences help us grow as individuals. And right now, in this season of growth for me, I am learning how to be comfortable being uncomfortable. As someone that is always, planning, I typically like being in control, or at least knowing what's going on. I don't always have to be in control. I know how to yield sometimes, and definitely when needed. But I like knowing what's going on. And being a young adult, being a recent graduate, I'm starting to become comfortable with the fact that not everything is going to always go your way. Some things are genuinely beyond your control. Not everything you can always fix. You can definitely put your best foot forward and definitely have a positive attitude every step of the way. But I'm trying to, like I said, become comfortable being uncomfortable.
I can't hear you right now.
Oh no.
Oh, okay, I can hear you now.
Okay, what was the last thing you heard?
You said the last thing I heard was being comfortable, being uncomfortable. So can you
Yeah.
start from there?
So right now, I'm just trying to. That's where I'm trying to grow. What I'm trying to grow towards is being comfortable, being uncomfortable, and appreciating experiences as they come, whether or not I see the purpose in them or agree with the scenario at that time. For me, I genuinely enjoy knowing and learning how other people think and why they act the way they do, or why do we perceive things the way that we do. And so when I look at life's experiences and what they teach me and the relationships they bring me and things like that, um, I'm trying to learn that not all of that is within my control and just be okay with that and just kind of go with the flow sometimes, because often what I've learned is trying to be in control all the time, you miss out on a lot of opportunities that you had never even explored because you're so one track minded and you have tunnel vision. So I'm trying to expand my horizons and allow myself to see what else is out there instead of being so steadfast solely on what I want and my intentions. I'm trying to be more open and receptive to what the universe has to offer for me. So, not all of those experiences are going to necessarily be comfortable to me because they may be unfamiliar to me, but that doesn't mean that it's going to be a negative experience. I'm trying to break down that connotation and allow myself to just exist in peace and understand that, in the world that we live in the universe that we exist in, some of these things are going to happen and it's okay. And if I'm really trying to become a woman of faith, a woman that trusts, that I can make wise decisions, a woman that understands that I am more than capable of doing anything I set my mind to, then I need to become comfortable being uncomfortable for the time being. And once I become comfortable, that means that I've now adapted a new skill. It means that I've now opened up my mind to new possibilities. And in doing so, I feel that I would then have achieved a new level of self growth.
Mm-hmm. I can relate to that. It from the last episode towards the end, one of the quotes was, "We can in the unknown is where we can find ourselves or discover ourselves." And so when
Mhm.
you were saying like being comfortable, uh, being uncomfortable,
Mhm.
I, I I I reflect on that statement that from the previous episode, and I think for me, I embrace the unknown, and it
Mhm.
seems like um, the the unknown is something that we are all challenged to embrace. And so for you, how open are you to participating in unknown experiences that you've yet to have perspective of?
Um, I think it depends on the particular experience and how well I prepared myself for it, to the best of my ability. Because like I said, you can't always control everything. But you can definitely do your research. You can definitely have people near you who you lean on that, like this is a new experience for me. I've never been on a podcast episode, but I get to do it with you. I get to do it with my uncle, which I think is pretty cool. You have knowledge of it, and we get to have such a positive conversation that reflects both of us in our periods of self growth, which I think is really cool. But I asked questions beforehand. I wanted to just know what exactly am I getting myself into before I say yes, because I also try not to commit to things that I don't believe that I can, maintain or uphold. I want to make sure that I remain a woman of my word and things like that. And when I say I'm going to do something, I am. And I think when it comes to trying out new experiences, I just want to know what exactly am I agreeing to before I absolutely say yes. But I won't say that, I'm just going to immediately say no to anything. I'm going to consider the pros and cons, weigh out my options, and then make an educated decision. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I like to think that I'm pretty open to learning more about them. I won't say I'm open to just saying yes to everything, but I
Mhm.
definitely am open to learning more about things that I'm unfamiliar with or uncomfortable with because, like I said, that is how you grow as an individual, in my opinion.
Yes, I can relate to it. And I think being inquisitive is appropriate when presented with potential opportunities, specifically from someone other than yourself. I think it seems like sometimes we won't get these indicators or from individuals where, based on the unexpected aspects of life, sometimes the unknown is presents itself whether we want to or not.
Right.
And so I think those types of experiences could be considered more challenging to others than some. Have you experienced the unknown? Have
That's
you?
Terrell. I'm sorry. She's trying to walk across my laptop. I don't know why she wants to do this right now. I swear.
Speaking of
Oh,
speaking of unexpected circumstances,
hello, everyone. Hello.
but yeah, um, yeah. Have you experienced the unknown, uh, whether you try to avoid the situation or not?
Absolutely. My time at Howard was eye opening for me. In more ways than I probably can tell. There's probably things that I still have yet to realize about my experience and my time at the Mecca. And the older I get, the more wisdom that I acquire, I probably will be able to reflect better on those experiences. But I think the biggest thing um, was being able to put myself out there and to be able to network with people I didn't know and feeling like a small fish in a very, very, very big pond, um, an ocean, actually, because I think when you go to a school such as Howard University, you understand that you are surrounded by peers who are all at the top of their class. You are surrounded by people who have their own businesses, were valedictorians, were on the leadership committee, presidents of their classes, all these wonderful and marvelous accolades. And in my experience, what I've seen is that that can do one of two things. It can either drive you to do better, or it can diminish your self worth and make you feel as though you're less than. And for me, because I graduated high school in 2020, shout out El Cerrito High School. um, Going into college through the pandemic was very difficult, and I developed a severe sense of social anxiety when we started, coming back into a sense of normalcy. I didn't know how to interact with people in unfamiliar spaces or necessarily make friends as a young adult because the same hobbies that I partook in high school, I was no longer a part of in college, or the same interests that I may have had when I was 16 years old different than when I was 18. And those things were fine. But for a moment in time, it hindered me from trying to seek out new experiences because I was so afraid of what I didn't know or what could possibly happen. And I allowed myself to shelter myself so much. I quite literally stayed in my apartment. Um, and I had completely online classes. I think for the first year that I was in Washington, D.C., I went to campus maybe 20 times in the entire academic year. So that's really not a lot. It's really not a lot in the grand scheme of things. And when the end of sophomore year came, I had the realization that I only had so much time left at Howard. And I thought to myself, what have I done with my time while I've already been here? And I was very disappointed that I hadn't. done more because I had so many ambitions and dreams and desires and goals that I aimed to reach when I first enrolled in the university. And I felt as though I had wasted my time there because I was so afraid of what I didn't know. So I made the promise to myself at the end of the school year, or the summer between sophomore and junior year at Howard University. I told myself that I would do absolutely everything in my power to make the most out of my junior year so that I can have the greatest impact on my senior year. So
Mm-hmm.
it was basically a 2 year plan that I executed. And so when I came back to campus that fall, I forced myself to go out and, just explore campus by myself, because typically I didn't want to go unless my roommate was with me, or, one of the few friends that I had made that lived in my apartment building that also went to Howard. I just didn't want to try anything out unless someone was there with me to experience it as well. And I realized that was a huge part of the reason why I missed out on so many great opportunities. There were so many things that I didn't know um, before I had this realization that I wished I had, that I allowed myself to miss out on. There were certain programs on campus that would have paid for me to study abroad, offered me additional financial aid. There were clubs that I wanted to join that I didn't think even existed on campus, but I hadn't done my research to even know about those things. And so when I got back to campus that fall, I started going to campus alone. I took it very slow. It was definitely a process. I think the first time I chose a day where I didn't have class. I didn't have class on, I think it was Fridays. So I, hopped on the shuttle to campus and I just walked around. I just wanted to see the campus, experience it, take it slowly, but not a day where I had class or a day where I felt like I needed to present myself a certain way, or that I would be stuck talking to a lot of people at once because I was going to become very overstimulated due to my anxiety. So I chose a day. I went to campus. I just toured the buildings, just walked around. I want to know where these things are. I want to know what all of it looks like. What does it feel like? Because I toured Howard in, I want to say 2018, but I believe it was during their spring break. So campus was technically closed and we weren't allowed to actually enter any of the buildings. So I had been there, but I never actually had been there. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So that was step one. The next step was to start engaging with others. So I went online and I did my research, via social media, websites, the Howard University site, to find out what clubs were available that I may or may not be interested in. The first thing that I saw that was doing intake at that point in the school year was this organization called YALI. It is the Youth Africa, or the Young Africana Leadership Initiative, excuse me. And so basically, it is an organization that aims to help connect all students that are within the African diaspora. They will educate you on all of the different cultures within the diaspora. It allows you to have an exchange with people who are your peers. But, for me specifically, it's someone who doesn't know too much about our history past of what Louisiana. We don't really know where our family is past Louisiana a few hundred years ago or so. I was very excited to learn more about the diaspora and just feel closer with Black culture in general, especially being at a HBCU. I felt so small minded. I felt like there were so many things I had never thought about: learning other cultural music and dances, trying new food, um, learning about, the students that were international students and what life was like before they came to Howard and to the United States and things like that. I found all of that very interesting, and Yali gave me that. Um, and, flash forward to my, what was it? The end of my junior year, I actually became an executive board member for Yali, and I became their programming coordinator because I had been so heavily involved with the organization that they saw my potential and they thought that I would be a good fit to be an executive board member and basically create all of the programming, planning, events, and things like that for the next academic school year, which was my senior year. So that was like my first real achievement, and I knew that I had met a period of self growth for myself
Mm-hmm.
because I saw the fruits of my labor beginning to grow.
Mm-hmm.
I think another thing was partaking more in the academic life on campus, and really trying to utilize my merits to my benefit as much as I could. And so, when was this? This was in the spring of 2023. I was inducted into the very first cohort of the flagship student ambassador program under the College of Arts and Sciences at Howard University. So we are the first, and we are also under the oldest and boldest college at Howard University. And what we do, we are delegates of the university. We represent both the student body as well as the administration, locally, on campus, and internationally. And I was fortunate enough this year to go on two study abroad trips. One of them I planned, in part with four other team members, part of Team Kwame Ture under the flagship ambassador program. And we created an initiative called Tutors for Trinidad, where we traveled to Trinidad and Tobago for a week long by ourselves, no chaperones. This was just us, and we were able to tutor students in a school, in Black Rock Government Primary School in Trinidad. I'm sorry, in Tobago, correction, for a week long, and we independently each taught in a separate classroom, and we developed lesson plans. We taught them new material. One of my teammates actually taught the fifth graders the lattice method because they were preparing for their benchmark exam for them to go to secondary school. And things like that. It was really cool. And at the end of the trip, when we returned back to stateside, we were fortunate enough to raise, I want to say, $2,000, I believe it was, to donate to Black Rock Primary School, for them to be able to get new school supplies and things like that that they very much needed. I love those kids. They were so amazing. They were so kind. The teachers at the school were so welcoming, and they were open and receptive to our help as well. It was a very gratifying experience, especially for it being my first time ever leaving the United States. It was amazing. And it was all paid for by Howard University.
Mm-hmm.
The second trip, I got to go to Guadeloupe, which is in the French Caribbean, and we stayed there for 10 days. And we were there again as delegates of Howard University. We met local officials. We learned more about the ecology in the country, and what they need at this moment in time. We were able to speak to people at the port. What is it? I can't recall the name right now. The Port Authority, that's what it was. We went and spoke to their Port Authority, which is basically, the entity that is in charge of all boat operations in their ports there in Guadeloupe. And we talked about how the port operations are affecting the water there around the island. They currently have a huge problem with toxic seaweed that is flowing in from other parts of the ocean and things like that. It's affecting the general population from having clean access to clean drinking water, showering, things like that. It was a huge deal. And when we were at the Port Authority, we were able to address those concerns that we had heard from the locals and bring that attention to the Port Authority, which of course they already acknowledged and were aware of. But we were able to directly give the questions that we had gotten from the locals there, from engaging with them, speaking to them, and even more so outside of the Port Authority, different government issues and politic issues that they may or may not have right now.
Mm-hmm.
And we were able to address those head on with the people that were in charge, which I thought was amazing. Aside from that, we were also there to inaugurate the partnership between the University d'Antilles,
Mm-hmm.
which is a university in Guadeloupe, and Howard University. So we now have a foreign exchange program partnership between Howard University and the University d'Antilles, and every year, I believe there will be 50 students that will be allowed to go from one university to the other, and they will spend a semester there. And for the students in Guadeloupe, when they come, if they are able to come and study in the United States, the cost associated would be the same cost that they have there in Guadeloupe. They wouldn't cost them any additional fee for their studies. They just are left with figuring out transportation, like travel and housing, which is a really cool experience, especially for an entire semester abroad. And all of these things were opportunities that I would have never come across had I not just taken that first initiative to go explore campus. Just walking into the College of Arts and Sciences and knocking on doors, saying hello to professors, greeting new people, making new friends who introduced me and helped me network in ways that I hadn't imagined were even possible at that time. I just wanted to explore. But for a year, I limited myself and I sheltered myself and I outcast myself because I was so afraid of what I didn't know. And now I sit and I think back on that year, that sophomore year, and I wonder what else could I have accomplished if I had just taken the time to open myself up to those new experiences, you know? And I mean, I can go on and on about all that Howard gave me. The list is is endless. I love my time at Howard University. I love my HBCU dearly. But I only wish that I would have utilized my resources to their full advantage while I had the time.
Wow, that's amazing, and I appreciate your elaboration and the various experiences and outcomes from starting the initiative of exploring the campus, which was a choice and a willful act, to journeying to islands and helping children. I think your efforts are very exum- exemplified. They exemplify what self growth is from my perspective. They also exemplify the willingness to embrace and participate in the unknown. And it would seem like you also help to enhance your self identity as a result of you participating in unknown experiences. What I want to ask you is starting back to your act of going to visit the various sections of the campus.
Mm.
My I'm a believer that growth can inspire growth. And so I'm curious to know, was there an experience that inspired you to want to step out of your dorm room and venture out and try to go into the unknown, which was uh, the various halls and uh, classrooms that you did?
Yeah, and there definitely was. And I don't think it was an isolated experience or occurrence. I think it had been kind of snowballing with time, you know, over those few months that I was in my apartment and having my courses online and things like that. I typically would just see a lot of my peers that I had, you know, connected with via Instagram, Twitter, different things, all the social medias. Um, I would see how much fun they were having on campus and all of the great experiences that they were gaining. And I found myself almost having a sense of envy for them. You know, I was, of course, very proud of them, very, very proud of them. Um, but I also sat back and asked myself, well, why don't I have that? And the largest and biggest determining factor was that I didn't put myself out there. I hadn't looked into it. I hadn't researched. I hadn't tried. I didn't try. And you know, I mean, the opportunities weren't going to get up and walk to my front door and drop themselves off. That was never going to happen. So I ended up having to make a choice. I was either going to let myself continue to isolate and be alone and miss out on all the things that I wanted in out of my time at Howard, or I was going to become comfortable being uncomfortable for a small moment in time that ended up giving me a lifetime's worth of memories that I will cherish forever. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Um, the fear of missing out, I think that's pretty much what finally drove me to make that decision. And I want to say the last determining factor, because like I said, it was a culmination of a lot of different events that I had missed out on, or opportunities that I found myself, you know, desiring but just quite couldn't grasp yet. I think what I missed out on that final time was the opportunity to join a particular program. Um, and it wasn't a program at Howard. It was a different outside program that basically would have started me on a track to go straight to medical school following my graduation from Howard University. But the only requirement is that you had to be a sophomore in college. So when I found that out, I was like, what did you do? I mean, you missed out on such an amazing opportunity simply because you didn't take the time to explore what was out there for you. And all it took for me to learn about that opportunity was to go to campus and walk into an office and just talk to someone. I was simply talking to one of the advisors on campus and expressing my interests to her. And she was just telling me about all these options that I had at that time, but when we began discussing eligibility requirements and things like that, and we started getting down to the nitty gritty of things for me to be able to apply, I found out that I had just missed the deadline. And I thought to myself, if only I had done this sooner, because I didn't go into her office with the intention of leaving with an opportunity or anything like that. I simply wanted to get to know more about who the people in this office were and what do you all do. And she took an interest into me. Her name is Miss Tracy Truitt. I love her. We still keep in contact to this day. She's a wonderful and amazing woman. Um, and she was an associate dean for the College of Arts and Sciences, and her door just happened to be open that day.
Mm.
And after some time talking, she said to me, Jaszwan, I think you'd be a great fit for this program. You should look into it and apply. So once I did go home and look into the program, and I figured out that I had missed the window of opportunity for it. I told myself I don't want to miss a window of opportunity for anything else. You
Mm.
know, if I try and I don't get it, then that's one thing, and that's okay. I'll cut my losses and I'll be fine. Uh-oh, can you still hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. If I apply for an opportunity and I don't get it, then that's okay. I will cut my losses and I'll move on. There will be other opportunities. But to know that it was a possibility and I had never even taken the time to attempt to make it or reach that goal, that was a crushing experience for me, because then I started thinking to myself, what else have I missed? What else have I allowed myself to, you know, pass me by? And I don't want to do that anymore. So that's when I told myself I was going to do everything in my power to make, I'm going to use my junior year to make my senior year as successful as possible. And
Hmm.
I feel like I did just that.
Yeah. I want to also propose a theory in terms
Okay.
of your motivation to initiate trying new experiences, from your statement where you said that I chose to visit the classrooms and the various parts of Howard University because I was somewhat envious of my peers who were demonstrating a willingness to do what I was planning to do. And I think it's also possible that it wasn't simply just fear of missing out on opportunities that was motivating or inspiring you. I would also theorize that just simply listening to your peers speak about their experiences, regarding um, what they were doing on campus, which you weren't doing at the time, as also inspiration for you to uh, put forth an effort and try similar to themselves. And I think the contrast is not so much fear, but simply I would theorize it was um, elaboration or them being descriptive of the unknown, the
Hmm.
unknown for you, but not to them. And
Yeah.
so, like, I can speak about an experience, but until you actually experience it, the what we're talking about, I think it would still be unknown to you, because it's up to you to act and participate in an experience that I've done that I'm now sharing with you as well. Would you can you relate to that, or do you
I,
uh yeah.
sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Um, I definitely can. Um, and I do agree that that was a huge proponent in why I chose to put myself out there more. And it
Mhm.
wasn't that, I don't want their lifestyle or I don't want to become this person and do everything that they do. You know, I have different friends with different interests, different friend groups that I do different things with. And I think the more that I spoke to each of them, although they didn't necessarily have anything in common, but because I have something in common with each of them, you know what I mean? Different facets of my life. Someone might be involved in dance, another one is involved in a leadership forum, another one is doing something with hair care and style, different things that piqued my interest or new hobbies that I was trying to take on. And oh, I had thought to myself, oh, that would be fun, but it maybe I can't do it, or it won't work out, or I just don't know what could happen.
Mhm.
So I never even attempted it. But hearing their experiences, like you said, being able to put a label on the unknown and seeing how well it worked out for them, I thought I want that for myself too. And it may not even have been necessarily the same positions or the same experiences, but I thought to myself, I want something that fulfills me the way that my friends feel fulfilled.
Mhm.
Something that gives me a purpose in my time at Howard, something that gives me a craft to perfect, something that allows me to express my creativity, something that allows me to network. All of these things, everything that I partook in my time at Howard gave me a sense of fulfillment within. But that seed was planted by my friends and their experiences. But I had to nourish it. I had to water it. I had to make sure it got enough sunlight every day. I had to make sure I left the house, made sure that I'm staying on top of my connections, make sure that when I say I'm going to call and text and email, whatever the case, that I follow up on those things. Make sure that just because I don't believe that this opportunity is going to work out for me, that doesn't mean I can't try. Because the worst thing that anyone could say is no. And
Mhm.
even then, not every no is a definite no.
Mhm.
Sometimes things work out in your favor and you never even expected it to. Or one opportunity may not be right for you, but it could open a doorway for something that is. Just
Mhm.
because you met this person and they said, "Hey, this might not be suited for you, but I have something else that I think you'd be perfect for."
Mhm.
Um, all of those things I have experienced, but like I said, that seed was planted by the experiences of my friends, and I think that that seed was nourished by the hopes and dreams that I had for myself. And that seed has flourished and grown because I allowed myself to be comfortable being uncomfortable and familiarizing myself with the unfamiliar.
Mm. I appreciate that. I'm curious to know more about your volunteer work in Trinidad and Tobago, or Tobago, in context to growth and for inspirational purposes. What, how, if any, oh, what's the word? No. How were you able? How did that experience in with volunteering with children in the Caribbean inspire you as an individual, if any?
Um, I think that, well, okay, the initiative itself was something that I thought of, and then my team and we collectively coordinated and planned. But the initiative itself, I created or I brainstormed because I wanted when we were first given the opportunity. Let me explain. Let's backtrack, and so you can understand how we got there and how this all worked and things like that. Under the flagship student ambassador program, each ambassador is guaranteed a one study abroad experience for their academic school year for the term that your cohort is active. So at the beginning of the school year, or really, truthfully, it was the summer before the fall 2023 semester. Our advisors gave us the task of creating an initiative.
Mm-hmm.
And it could be anything we wanted it to be. This study abroad experience could be whatever we wanted it to be. It could be, oh, okay, all across the keyboard. It could be anything we wanted it to be. And we had a budget. Oof, I can't remember what the budget was at this moment in time, but they gave us parameters for this assignment,
Mm-hmm.
and then they told us, go be free, brainstorm with your team, come back with ideas. When I thought about what we could do with this money, I wanted to make sure that it was something that would be positive and have a long lasting impact on the lives of others, that it wouldn't just be a selfish experience that we benefit from. Um, because it would have been so easy for us to say, hey, let's go on a week long paid vacation on Howard's dime. We could have just said, yeah, we're studying abroad. We're learning more about this country by doing these excursions and hiking through the forest and going on boats, all these things. And while you can, and we did at different points in times during both of the trips, go out on excursions, for that first trip in particular, I wanted to make sure that we were giving back in some way to a community that is not as fortunate as we are. Um, my personal passion, I love working with children. That's also part of the reason why I went into psychology, and I intend on going into pediatric psychiatry, is because I love working with the youth. I fully believe that if we raise our children right and we educate them properly and give them the tools that we have, but also the tools that we needed as kids, then they are better prepared for the world, rather than us trying to. We're proactively preparing them rather than trying to go back and fix things after they've already happened. You know what I mean? So I thought about that. I said, okay, something with the youth. Let's work with youth. Let's allow them to see what they are capable of. Us as five young black gifted students being able to go study somewhere else abroad and show them, hey, this is what we do here at our university, and this is what you can do if you go to college as well. If this is what you choose to do, this is possible for you. You know what I mean? So,
Mm-hmm.
okay, that was the basis of it. Then I thought, how do I pay homage to not only Howard University, but also our namesake, Kwame Ture? Because, like I said, we acted as the team Ture of the flagship ambassador program. And Kwame Ture was a renowned, his given name is Stokely Carmichael as well. But he was a renowned Pan Africanist, and he fully believed that for us as a people or as a culture to succeed, we must uplift one another. And so in my mind, I'm thinking children, I'm thinking uplifting the black community, and I'm thinking that Stokely Carmichael, he was born in Trinidad. That is where he is a native of. And he also is a Howard alum. And so in my mind, all of these things are just connecting right back to one another. So we have kids, we have, wanting to unite the black diaspora and uplift other black people. um, we are paying homage not only to our team's namesake, but also Howard University, as we are going on this trip as a representative and delegates of the university. And so I thought to myself, okay, well, what if we go to Trinidad and Tobago and we give back to students in schools? And so from there, we just brainstormed, what could we do? What's most effective? What do they need? Because we didn't want this to come across as performative activism at all. That was the last thing we wanted to do, was to just show up and take some pictures and then leave, because that's done far too often, especially with kids, and I don't agree with that behavior whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
So we said we're going to pick a school and we're going to get in contact with them. We will ask them what they need, if anything at all, from us, and if they would be open to having our help when we get there. So we were able to get in contact with Black Rock Government Primary, and we spoke with their principal, Miss Calendar, and she was so sweet. She was so kind, so receptive. It's a pretty small school. There are about, I want to say, 7 classrooms, um, two pre-K or no, one pre-K class, one kindergarten class, and then first through fifth grade. Yes. And so there were only 5 of us. So we also made sure to rotate through the classes so that no one felt excluded or left out as well in our time there. And when we showed up, we didn't necessarily have a plan for what we wanted to do. We just wanted the teachers to know that we were there for them in any capacity that they needed. That could
Yeah.
be grading papers, that could be, just sitting back and helping the students with their classwork while teachers handle other work that they have to do for the day. Because being a teacher is a very difficult job and it's very underappreciated, especially if you're in an under resourced community. So we wanted to let the teachers know that we were there for them first and foremost. And if they would allow us to, we can bring our strengths to the students as well. So while I was there, I was teaching primarily English language arts to the third grade classroom. My peer, I told you, my teammate, she was teaching the fifth grade classroom, and she was teaching them primarily mathematics, different things where everyone, that really reflected our passions, our strengths, but also would be helpful to the students and the teachers while we were there. And then, like I said, furthermore, when we left, we didn't want the children or the teachers at the school to feel that we came and then just left with no regard for how they would do once we were gone. So when we
Yeah.
came back home, we decided we wanted to do a little bit more for them. And that was why we raised the money to be able to send to them, because they had mentioned while we were there, oh, we don't have enough for our pencils, or oh, we need new televisions because not every classroom has them. New whiteboards, things like that. Some of the older boards that are just a little bit harder to read, and the students are having some difficulty. Things that it's very small things that we would take for granted here in the United States because we're so accustomed to them, but it makes a world of difference for those students there in Tobago. So that was all of that were the driving factors for that initiative. And like I said, because we knew that there was no cost for us, there was no cost associated for us, then we wanted to make sure that we used that experience in the best way possible to give back to others, because it costs absolutely nothing to be a good person.
Yes, I agree with you, and I appreciate the insight and the details of what I call the give, the give of life, the giving of life,
Hmm.
the giving aspect of life. You gave a service by arriving to the schools, teaching the kids how to be more proficient in writing, learning to speak English, and this is a part of growth. How?
Well, actually, if I can
Yet,
interrupt really quickly, the kids do speak English. I want to clarify that. So sorry. They do speak English in Trinidad and Tobago. So there was no communication barrier. They simply just have slight accents, but I understood them perfectly fine. And I don't think any of my teammates had any trouble understanding them either. We got that quite a bit from the locals there. They kept asking us, could we understand them? But I think we got through pretty well without any communication difficulties. Um, and also to that effect, when you talk about the giving of life, I think what we took from that experience is we felt like our work had actually made a difference in their lives. When we left, the kids were saying, well, when are you going to come back? Are you able to come here again? And unfortunately, we had to tell them, well, we're not sure exactly when we'll be able to come back, but we promise you we're going to do our absolute best to make sure that this can be an annual initiative, because
mm,
there's a new cohort of flagship student ambassadors every year now. So although we were the first, our hope is now that the next team Kwame Ture is able to go back to Tobago and still help those next group of students and continue that on. And hopefully, as the program expands and grows with time, we can go to other schools in the country. We can make sure that we're giving back to people in other locations that need it as well. But furthermore, some of the kids were saying, I'm going to go to Howard University so I can be like you guys and I can go other places and teach kids about HBCUs, because they didn't know what an HBCU was. We explained that to them. And they didn't know that schools will pay to send their students away and do these types of things, and bring more resources to underserved communities and things like that. They thought it was so cool. And seeing the light in those kids' faces was the most gratifying experience I think I may have ever had in my entire life.
That's amazing. And that's what I was curious to know. And not to say that the giving that you provided is value less than the taking from the experience, similar to an exhale versus an inhale. They're both equally resourceful and valuable. And
Hmm.
so it seems from what I hear is that by you providing this volunteer work to the children, which was the give, the take was the the expressions from the individual kids telling you that they appreciate your initiative by creating this project and being there for them. Is that a accurate
Yeah,
statement?
it is. It's a very accurate statement.
Okay, and that simple act could be overlooked or unappreciated by some, just the simple thank yous of life. However, what I think is valuable in that simple expression is the fact that they are demonstrating or reflecting your initiative, which was simply being there for them. That was the first act. And then the reflection is them saying, thank you, I appreciate you, are you coming back? And I think, too, that relationship, um, that particular instance for me demonstrates unconditional appreciation. Because, and I think unconditional appreciation is like the ideal type of appreciation that, at least for me, I hope to experience. And I hope that my appreciation for someone else is also unconditional in every case. Because I think to experience unconditional appreciation or love is something unique. And so I think what's inspirational about your testimony for me personally is the unconditional relationship that y'all had, at least in that moment. I know that it's possible for us to construct conditions going forward, but the hope is that we can all at some point in our lives learn to be unconditional when having relationships with other people and vice versa. Hopefully they are also unconditional to us as well, similar to a child and a mother or a child and a father. Like that's the ideal relationship for me.
Yeah.
I think we're going to proceed on
Okay.
to the next section of the podcast, which is the multiple intelligence theory. I'm going to share the next scene. And so, for those who are new to the podcast, I'll give a brief description of the multiple intelligence theory. There are two popular popularized theories when it comes to intellect. One is more popular than the other. The more popular intellect, which was created by a theorist named, I think, Frederick Beignet, suggests that we as individuals have three forms of intellect, which would be mathematical or logical, linguistic, such as writing skills, and naturalistic skills, such as science or being scientific. And so, as a result of the majority of people adopting this theory in terms of how smart we are, we're tested in high school on these three forms of intellect. And depending on how well you perform on a test, such as the SAT, academic institutions will consider you more acceptable to be admitted to their colleges. However,
Mhm.
there's an alternative theory presented by a theorist named Howard Gardner, who suggests that in addition to the three intellects that I mentioned, there's six additional intellects that we as individuals possess, um, and which are musical, existential, interpersonal, bodily kinesthetic, intrapersonal, and spatial. The
Mhm.
reason why I present this theory in the podcast is so that individuals, can become aware of these various intellects,
Mhm.
because certain people may have low self esteem due to the fact that they have low degrees of the particular intellects that are popular, such as scientific, mathematical, or writing. However, if they become aware of the six others that exist, maybe they actually have high degrees of intellect in the six others, which can be inspirational and motivational for them to want to continue on developing and enhancing their mind and their body. So I like to present this to in this section, or this theory in the podcast. And so my question to you, Jaszwan, is, of the nine multiple intelligences of the multiple intelligence theory, which one or more do you sense you have high degrees of intellect in? And then the second question is, how would you suggest to listeners, um, how would you suggest to listeners that they can enhance their degrees of intellect similar to how you have done in your life?
Okay. Um, Gosh. I like to think that I have a pretty clear understanding of intra and interpersonal connections and intelligences. Um,
Mm-hmm.
because like I mentioned earlier, I've always enjoyed learning and knowing how and why people think the way that they do, and understanding different perspectives. And I think that as I've gotten older, I've become very good at learning to see things through other people's eyes, even when I don't agree with them.
Mm-hmm.
We don't always have to see we don't always have to agree on everything, but I can understand where you're coming from. And I think that that's something that a lot of people, especially a lot of adults, have a hard time with. And that's typically why we end up in conflict, because we are so focused on trying to get people to hear our perspective that we aren't even open to listening to theirs and trying to understand where they're coming from. Whether you agree or disagree, at the end of that discussion, I think valuing and understanding someone else's perspective builds our intelligence overall,
Mm-hmm.
um, because it forces you to think critically outside of your own lenses. And it also helps you gain insight on where someone else is coming from and what could have been done differently, or how do you handle this situation or something with this person in the future. So I like to think that I'm pretty good with intra and interpersonal intelligences. um, I also think that I'm pretty good with musical intelligence, being able to discern sounds and pitch, tone, rhythm, things like that. I love music deeply. We have a musically inclined family. I used to play trumpet, piano, guitar, drums, steel pan, harana, flute, all different types of things, because I genuinely enjoy music and I think it has a way of healing us internally. I think, well, in my experience, it brings me a sense of peace. And it's also a cross cultural connection, because almost every culture has their own music that they enjoy that holds some semblance of importance to their people. And I think that learning about that opens our horizons a lot more, especially when you know the folklore behind a lot of the music that they listen to. So I enjoy that as well, and I think I'm pretty good with that. Uh, I want to say that by the end of my life, I hope that I have acquired a good knowledge of existential intelligence,
Mm-hmm.
and understanding, why we live and why we die, why do we exist, what's our purpose. Because, like I said earlier, I do believe that we are all put on this earth with a purpose or a mission, but we along the way choose our goals and desires, and we have new experiences that may shift our pathways. So I'm hoping with time throughout my life I learn more about existential intelligence, but it's definitely something that has already piqued my interest and I'm still actively learning about. That's also a part of my self growth.
Mm-hmm.
um, and the others, I'm not naturally inclined, but I definitely am open to learning more about. And I think that that's where having a group of peers that are not exactly like you want people that you have common interests with, of course, that you want to have some sort of common foundation for a friendship or a partnership, whatever the case may be. But you also don't want to be surrounded by people who think exactly like you, because how can you ever learn more about the world around you if you're allowing yourself to be boxed in? You and your friend group, you have to. We don't have to, but I think that it's worth trying to understand, like I said, other people's perspectives and experiences, because it gives you a different outlook on life. And especially if it's a life that you haven't lived, you know, if I honestly, truthfully, if we had stayed in Atlanta, Georgia longer than we had, there would have been a whole lifestyle here in California that I would have never experienced or learned about. A lot of basic function, like life functions that I wouldn't know how to do, how to take the bus, how to use the BART, how to do all these things. But in the grand scheme of things, it taught me how to be more aware of my surroundings. It taught me a sense of direction. It taught me, how to fend for myself. It taught me to be more self sufficient. All of these things that I wouldn't have learned if I wasn't open and receptive to understanding a perspective besides my own, and experiencing new things. To viewers who are looking to enhance their different types of intelligences, the same thing that I've been saying for this entire podcast, you have to be comfortable being uncomfortable. The unfamiliar is just that, because you have no prior knowledge to it. But once you learn more about things, you can make an educated decision about whether that's something you want to pursue or not, or whether it's something you agree with. And at the end of the day, even if it's something you disagree with, having that insight of perspective, and allowing yourself to just see where other people are coming from sometimes, it helps you personally process situations differently.
Mm-hmm.
um I mean, I feel like a lot of times the conflict is driven because we, like I said, we're just so busy and we're caught up in our own headspace that we just don't take a moment to step back and, one, recalibrate and see how are we coming across? How are you coming across as an individual? You know, is your communication style effective for the audience that you're speaking in front of? Are you coming across aggressive, or are you being passive? Are you speaking out of anger, or are you speaking out of passion? Are you listening for understanding, or are you listening so that you can prepare your response? Because those are two totally different things, all of those things. So if you really are looking to enhance the different types of intelligences within yourself, you need to be open to trying new things. You need to be comfortable being uncomfortable. And even if there are experiences that you don't necessarily like or agree with, appreciate and value it for what it was and the time that you spent having that experience, and you can move on from it, because at the end of the day, that is now going to be a part of your self growth process. You can say, I tried this thing, I've done it, I didn't necessarily like it, but it gave me a new perspective and outlook on life, and I can utilize that in my future experiences. It makes me more aware of my boundaries moving forward, or it allows me to understand other people's boundaries a little bit better. All of these things. So
Mm-hmm.
that would be my advice for them.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I relate to what you said. I think for me currently, I'm at a phase of my life where I am enhancing my interpersonal intelligence, and I think that's due to the opportunity to work in retail and have conversations with wide variety of customers, and these conversations are initiated by myself, and it's I do it because I want to relate to the world, or relate to the external experience that I am living in, which is the world.
Mhm.
And from the expressions that individuals present to me, I can discover more about myself based on the relatability that they are stating to me. It's possible that I may not relate to what they say, but if I can relate, then that's resourceful for my own growth as well.
Yeah.
I think that I like how you were talking about listening, not to just simply not to respond, but listening to understand or relate. Because what I discovered when it comes to parenting, particularly, there's different styles, and so the authoritarian parent, they may be communicating to the child with the expectation that the child is going to do as they say, and without being open to reciprocation or feedback from the child, which could hinder the relationship. If you want to enhance your interpersonal relationship with the child, I
Mhm.
think in order to to have a in order to genuinely enhance your interpersonal intelligence, you have to be willing to uh, take feedback and be receptive to what someone may say in response to what you're saying, versus trying to avoid the feedback. I think, yeah. So I think it's very vital, if you want to enhance your interpersonal intelligence, have a willingness to be receptive to someone else who you're communicating with. I think I like nature. I I not too long ago I went to Barnes and Nobles to buy a book that is based around the Bay Area wild not wildlife particularly, but Bay Area plants and trees,
Mm,
because we have a wide variety of plants and trees here in the East Bay, and
we do.
I like to go on walks and hikes in the local regional parks, and so sometimes if I'm walking by a beautiful plant or flower, I become mystified by it, because you know visually it looks nice, but I would like to know a little bit more about it. And so in order for me to relate better to the flower, I can, read up on it and learn more about it, which enhances my perspective of the flower or the tree. And it feels good to revisit a place that I've been to where these trees or flowers are growing, and
Mhm.
now have more details about it. And I sense an intuitive relationship due to my learning about more about it. So I would encourage people who want to become more aligned with the naturalistic side of life to put forth an initiative to read up on your local plants and plants and trees that you may encounter on a day to day basis. And I think also I want to add this too when it comes to the nine multiple intelligences. The diagram has white lines that's dividing the the various intellects, but it seems to me that all nine, though appearing to be separate on the diagram, are all interconnected as well. I don't think they are their own separate entities, but more they play a role uh, in our growth as individuals. Because I know sometimes for me, I think, especially when it comes to playing like sports, it's a very intuitive activity. You don't need to be in your head to you don't need to think about or you don't need to tell yourself in your mind to swing a bat. If the ball is coming across the plate, then simply if you notice it, you would simply swing the bat. And I think that's similar. That experience is similar to um, ha- uh, having a conversation with someone. You don't need to be in your head about what you want to say prior to saying it. You could just simply be engaging it and be intuitive about it when you start a conversation with someone. So it seems like all these intellects are interrelated. Would you agree with that, Jaszwan?
Yeah, I definitely think so. And I fully believe that we each have a capacity for to, enhance all of these intelligences. I think that there are just some that we are more naturally inclined towards, and then those typically are the areas that we gravitate to. Those are the hobbies we fulfill, or the friendships that we make, the interests that we like to learn more about. It's harder to enhance the intelligences that you don't feel are your strengths
Mm,
or necessarily the ones that pique your interest. So for me, you know, I'm not the best at mathematics and forming hypotheses. So the logical mathematical intelligence is not exactly my strong suit, but that doesn't mean that I'm unable to do so. And that also doesn't mean that I'm not able to better that intelligence, especially throughout the course of my lifetime.
mhm,
Um, I have terrible hand eye coordination, but I literally was a cheerleader for maybe about 7 years and a dancer. Um, and it's funny because dancing, truthfully, is a combination of bodily kinesthetic and musical intelligence. You
mm,
have to learn to coordinate your body with the music. But
mhm,
here, based on the diagram, those are two different areas. So there has to be some sort of correlation here in order for you to be able to move your body with the rhythm of the music, keep up with the tempo, and also discern which sounds are your cues to do a different move and things like that. So there definitely is a correlation there. Although I may not be the best at, playing baseball, because I just don't have that particular type of coordination. I could still do a 5 minute long dance routine, but that means I have to have some sort of bodily coordination there,
mhm.
because if I have just done a full on performance, and I get a standing ovation, I must have done something right. um, and like linguistic intelligence, I think that I sometimes I have a hard time expressing my thoughts because there's so many things going on in my head at one time. But that doesn't mean that I don't possess the vernacular to be able to explain how I feel or express my emotions to someone else. I can, but I just might need a little bit more time to process that. And I can go all around with all of the intelligences. I do believe that we all possess the capacity to enhance them. You just have to put in that effort, and you have to be willing to explore it. And don't doubt yourself or demean yourself because one is not your particular strength. And it's
Mhm,
okay to have weaknesses and acknowledge them, because truthfully, when you're able to identify your weaknesses, then you know which areas that you need to improve on, or which areas that you may need to compensate for. And then that helps our collective intelligence as a whole, I think.
Thank you. I appreciate that, and I relate to what you're saying. We're gonna move on because we're reaching the end of the podcast to
Okay.
one of my favorite sections, which is it is called interpreting expression. And so, to give insight on this section of the podcast, um, there we as individuals express ourselves, and there has been expressions historically, quotes or questions that are popular amongst people, and the reason why I theorize they're popular is because they are thought provoking and Some of them are even inspirational to people. And so what I like to do is I like to discover quotes, statements, which are expressions, and each episode present one where myself and the featured guest can share their interpretation of the quote or the question, so that we can hopefully relate to our each other's interpretations as well as the people who are listening to our expressions of the expression. So today's expression is seemingly the intent of an experience is to guide. And so Jaszwan deferred myself to share my interpretation of this quote first before her, which I don't mind. And also, before I get to that, she had asked me, "Well, why is there a dragon in this photo? How is that contextual to the statement?" I like to add artwork to the visual to because I'm a visual thinker. So I like to add art that I think is contextual to the quote to each episode's quote. So for me, the reason why I added this particular visual is because the dragon, from my view, uh, it represents an experience, and the child that's standing before the dragon would represent myself. And so the a dragon can be interpreted as something as dangerous, but it can also be interpreted as something majestic or honorary. But it's I think it depends on the perspective of the individual. So with that being said, my interpretation of this quote is I think whether an experience is dangerous or if an experience is of benefit, we as individuals who is currently experiencing it um, should be aware of its intent. The intent is to guide us one way or the other. If it's dangerous, if the experience is dangerous, then it's up to us to be disciplined enough to say, okay, this is an experience that I need to avoid. If it's of been and for example, like I've had friends who have passed away when I was a teenager due to various circumstances, and I think some of the circumstances, based on what I am aware of, could have been circumstances that were unavoidable. Yet it seems like they chose to willingly continue on in being participating in that experience when an alternative experience was likely presented to them.
Mm.
For example, one of my friends growing up, he passed away. He sold drugs, and I think there were indicators that that experience was a detriment or a danger to himself. Yet, despite those indicators, he willfully chose to continue on the course of being in that experience,
Yeah.
which ultimately resulted in another person shooting him.
Mm.
So I would say, like, yes, the universe does allow us to go on a path of detriment, but there's still intent behind the experience, and the intent is for you to hopefully realize. at some point there's going to be indications that this experience is trying to guide you from deviating from going along that path. However, and so yeah, that's one example. And then alternatively, there could be beneficial experiences that are also guides. Like you said earlier, you overheard conversations or you witnessed some of your peers while you were in high school willfully going to the various clubs or talking about the clubs, not clubs is in terms of like drinking, but clubs like social clubs.
Yeah.
And I feel like ultimately at its meta, another person is an experience. And
Mm,
so that person was subtly presenting guidelines for you to choose to adopt and use for you to go into the unknown and try to experience or attempt to experience what they were referring to. I think also some experiences may seem frightening to another person, despite the fact that the experience itself presents no obvious danger or it's not dangerous at all.
hmm.
I think there's been times in my life when I was younger where if I was walking down the street and someone my age who I'd never seen before, like was walking on the same side of the street with me, wearing like a black hoodie, like in my mind, I would start to create narratives like, oh, he has a black hoodie, so he's 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 wearing that because he's intending to rob me or hurt me.
Mm,
But that wasn't the case because once he walked by me, he and nothing happened.
yeah.
But and so yeah, he had a black hoodie on, and yeah, that was the experience of the moment. But I think the value that I took from that experience was don't have preconceived notions about people. The
Hmm.
you know, yeah, so like the experience did present itself, but it wasn't intended to make me afraid. The person in the black hoodie wasn't there to make me afraid. It was help me to guide myself in a way that I'm better aligned with the present moment of not having preconceived notions of people. So these are some examples or references that I want to use that to share my interpretation of this current expression. Okay, your turn.
Now, okay, your turn. Thank you. I definitely am glad that I asked you to give your interpretation first. I feel like you gave me a lot of insight as to why you chose this particular image to go along with the quote. Because, truth be
Mm,
told, I had already considered what I wanted to say simply regarding the quote itself. But now looking at the image, I feel like I have an additional component that I want to tie into my answer.
mm-hmm,
And I want to start by addressing the image first. So I think when I look at this, um, I like what you said about how the dragon here is the experience, and that you yourself would be the child there standing before it. And when I look at it, it kind of makes me wonder: is the dragon friend or foe?
mm-hmm,
In different cultures, a dragon can be a spiritual guide for a lot of people, and it is a proponent of peace and not harm, regardless of how it looks, even if it's large and scary and it breathes fire and all of these things. Um, it is a spiritual guide that brings you to a sense of enlightenment and gives you clarity. Um, and in a sense, the dragon or the experience is the guide. But when I talk about the quote itself, seemingly the intention of an experience is to guide, I think about how we oftentimes want to believe that in our pathway of self growth, that each experience is supposed to it's supposed to be a good one. We want to believe that all the experiences in our within our self growth are going to be good ones. But like I said earlier, you can't control everything, and in some instances, the intention of the experience is not necessarily to guide, but it could sometimes be a cautionary tale. I think that sometimes your experiences are supposed to stop you from going a certain way. And when I think of a guide, I think of something that leads you, but you don't necessarily consider the road blockers along the way. Just like if you're walking on a trail and there's a fork in the road, there's going to be a sign that tells you which way you should go, and it typically will tell you, if it's going to lead you to where you want to get to, but not always, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this sign is going to tell you it's going to this pathway will lead you this way and this path will lead you that way, but does it disclose where it will take you in the end? Does it tell you if it's going to allow you to meet where you're trying to reach? Like, is it going to allow you to reach your goal? And when I think of this quote, I think about how some experiences are meant not to lead us or drive us or push us, but sometimes they are meant to stop us from going down a road that we shouldn't take. Um, and I think about when you were talking about your friend who passed, and how he made decisions. At the end of the day, he weighed the consequences of his actions, and at the end of the day, he still made his decisions, and they led him to wherever they led him. Um, but it makes you wonder, were his experiences meant to drive him towards the pathway that he went down, or were they meant to be cautionary tales? Were they meant to be those red flags that alert you that, hey, this is not where you want to go, this is not what you should do? Let me be a warning for you, and show you that there is light in a different direction. Um, and I think that once you understand that not every experience is going to necessarily be an enjoyable one, but that doesn't mean that it matters any less, or that you should push it to the farthest extent of your mind. Because I think that's what we do. Normally, when we have negative experiences, we don't want to think about them. We don't want to consider how it could affect us and our self growth as we move forward. But sometimes you have to consider that that experience was necessary and needed, regardless of the outcome, or regardless of, like I said, whether you agreed with it or not.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's crucial to your development as an individual for you to see where you don't want to end up, or see where you shouldn't go, and keep you steadfast on the track. And that doesn't mean that you remain one track minded. That means that, like I said, you explore your options and you make an educated decision. You weigh your pros and cons and decide if the consequences are worth what you're looking for,
Mm-hmm.
um, those are all decisions we have to make throughout our lifetime. And because our self growth does not stop, the dragon is very well a friend and foe. It doesn't have to be one or the other.
Mm-hmm.
And when I say foe, I don't necessarily mean that it's our enemy, but a lot of times when people tell us something we don't want to hear, we we see that, we view that as them trying to tear us down, as them trying to be negative. Oh, you don't want me to reach my goal. You don't want to see me happy. You don't want to see me win. Well, that's not always true. Sometimes it is, but you can also step back and think, maybe they just want you to see from a different perspective. Maybe they're trying to warn you of something they've already experienced personally. Or maybe it's just trying to give you more information for you to be able to make your decision.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and at the end of the day, because it's your growth that is on the line and it's your decision, you have to decide, is the dragon a friend or foe today? Is the dragon trying to show me a positive, enlightening experience? And even if it's not, because sometimes we can see something as a positive and enlightening experience, and in reality, it's trying to distract us from our goals and missions. I think that, like I said, the dragon, it can be both friend and foe. Um, I think when you get down to it, we really have to consider that not every experience is supposed to be or is going to be a positive one. And negative experiences don't, it, like I said, it doesn't negate your growth that you've already had, and it will not hinder your growth in the future as long as you don't let it. You have to take that experience, allow it to, allow it to process within your mind and your body, and understand how you feel and why you feel the way that you feel. But when you move forward, if you allow yourself to process that experience and those emotions that are associated with it, once you move forward, you now have new knowledge. Whereas if you solely view an experience as negativity, and naturally we want to remove negativity from our mind, we don't want to carry it or harbor it with us, but unfortunately it does when it's not processed, then you just allow yourself to be crippled by that experience. And that does hinder your growth. How can you move forward when you're stuck reliving the same experience repeatedly because you think it was wrong, or you think something could have been done differently, or it didn't go the way that you wanted it to, XYZ. The list goes on and on for days. We can make excuses forever. But at the end of the day, like I said, it's your growth. So, are you going to let that experience stop you, whether it was good or bad? Is it going to stop you? Or are you going to take it into account, feel it, allow yourself to fully experience it? Because I also think when we experience things, we like to pick and choose what we experience. I want to keep the happy memories of this moment, and I'll just ignore all the negatives of that day. Or there was a silver lining in the moment of today, but there were 10 million things that went wrong. And so all I have of this day is terrible memories. Neither one is good. But I think that, like I said, in general, the experience can be friend or foe, and that choice is up to you.
Well said. I relate to what you're saying also. It was very, very resourceful. I appreciate that. We're reaching the end. Well, we have reached the end of the Journey of Self Growth podcast, episode 18. I appreciate everyone who tuned in. You are invited to be a guest if you're listening of the show. If you would like to be a future guest, you can reach out to me on Instagram at kete.music, KETE dot MUSIC. I do plan to change my handle soon, but for now, this is where you can reach me. Um, Jaszwan, what would your parting words be?
Thank you for having me. I think that for this to be my first experience on a podcast, I'm so glad and I'm thankful that I get to do it with you. I get to do it with my uncle, and I'm glad that it can be something pertaining to not only experiences that I'm still going through at this point in my life, experiences that I will continue to go through in my life as I evolve as a young woman, um, and that I can gain new insight and knowledge to carry on in my conversations with other people. I think that all of that is a huge, huge factor of self growth. Um, and I mean, you had explained to me before the podcast that, like, that is its purpose. This conversation that we're having is supposed to be a productive conversation that hopefully we both leave with a little bit more of growth in ourselves. That we both learn something or take away an experience from this today. So I'm just really appreciative, and I enjoyed talking with you tonight, answering all these questions. Um, and if anyone wants to continue this conversation, please feel free to reach out to me. My Instagram handle is there below. But yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. Are you sensing you're currently growing in this podcast experience?
I am. I am. I was definitely nervous coming into it. I wasn't sure how this was going to go, or if I would have the right answers or know what to say, but the conversation felt very natural. And I think it as I was speaking, I was saying things that I really hadn't even necessarily thought about before. I was thinking of what I would say in the moment, but the context of what I was talking about, were things that I hadn't considered. It made me reflect on my life. It made me reflect on what's brought me here. It made me reflect on how I intend to move forward. So I definitely do think so.
Thank you. Not I would say that the feeling is mutual. Your commentary helped me to um, enhance my awareness of what I wanted to speak about, and also become more improvising of how I wanted to express myself, which is how life seemingly is. I mean, it's an unexpected experience overall, and so that's why I think people say, go with the flow or be one with the flow of life because it's ever changing. And so for me to be able to express myself based on what you're saying, which is coming at me unexpectedly, it helps me to become more aligned with the universe as well.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I hope everyone enjoyed the show. Um, And I also hope that everyone will enjoy the rest of the evening. I appreciate you all. Jaszwan, you can stay on for a minute uh,
Okay.
before I go off. But yeah, everyone, good night. Thank you.
Good night.